Asgard's Wrath is an enormous 100-plus hour RPG behemoth, and it's only on the MetaQuest. You are the same cosmic guardian as the first game, trapped by Loki in the prison you helped him escape from. The Weavers of Fate will guide you on a path of revenge through ancient Egypt and the Nine Realms. It is an epic, worthy of its $60 price tag, though it is free with a Quest 3 purchase for a limited time. While I have some very minor issues, this game is worthy of being called a system seller. So let's get right into it and break down this gigantic title in the XboxEra review of Asgard's Wrath 2. As you start the game, Asgard's Wrath 2 will let you choose to sit through a short, fully rendered cutscene that depicts the events of the first title. Immediately, you'll get to see the graphical downgrade from that original title, and if you're like me, you're kinda shocked at how small it is. Asgard's Wrath 2 is a Quest native title only this time, and it looks fantastic running on what is essentially phone hardware. You are that cosmic guardian plucked from near death by Loki to be his protege. The trickster god did indeed trick you, and you're now stuck in the prison he was banished to for killing Balder. You'll quickly be rescued by three odd-looking and one topless for some reason beings who weave the threads of fate. A quick escape sequence and epic boss fight have you ending up in ancient Egypt, where you'll spend the majority of your next 100-plus hours fighting as a quartet of heroes. Your god's unique skill is taking over the form of a mortal at their request and using their unique skill sets to run, jump, puzzle, and fight your way through enormous levels and dungeons. Asgard's Wrath 2 feels like it has a big budget pretty much all the time. Every area has distinct voice work with a mix of solid and occasionally mediocre writing. I had roughly 2 very busy weeks to review this one, and after 90-ish hours, I still haven't beaten it. I am right near the end, and have played as every hero, unlocked all 5 companions, and spent a dozen hours in the game's endless mode. While it can feel a little slow to start, I did appreciate the pacing of it all. This is a game you'll want to take your time with. Not only because of how sore you may end up, but the Quest's battery life will be a constant issue if you're not plugged in. On average, I could get roughly 2-hour play sessions in before having to recharge. Thankfully, the charging is quick, and I was typically ready for a break by then anyways. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of any good VR game, and that is, how does it feel? Asgard's Wrath 2 is a mix of melee and ranged combat with a lot of platforming in between. Your first character is a warrior archetype. He has a sword, shield, and throwing axe. The sword eventually becomes a whip that he can pull himself forward or pull enemies to his feet with. He is the slowest to level and is essentially your tutorial character. Up next, you've got a water nymph who uses living beings as her weapons, which are a sword made out of a tongue that is also a whip, a shield that is also a harp/bow, and a little squid tart that shoots your foes. The third character was one of my favorites, a bow user with multiple types of ammo. Said bow is also a sword, she has a shield, and a freaking grenade. And last is a magic user, undead-looking guy who I had the least amount of time with, but in the end they all look and feel different enough that the variety made sure I never got bored. Each character has 4 weapon slots that you can upgrade through crafting, as well as multiple armor sets to build. In my time, I only built a few full armor sets and focused mainly on upgrading their weaponry. There are rune slots that can go into their gear that allow you to customize builds, and it's deep enough, though never confusing. You'll have 5 companions eventually that you can swap to at any time. It's less than the first game, but the system is better overall. Each companion also has armor sets to craft, as well as a friendship leveling system. You can up this just by using them or through fist bumps and high fives whenever they ask. You'll have a large leveling tree for each human you possess, focused on improving their weaponry and unlocking super moves that use a divine wrath meter you'll build up by hitting and deflecting enemies. Enemy variety is solid with different archetypes embodying different looks in each of the various biomes. You'll have crocodile enemies when you're in the Nile Delta themed area, or huge flying lava bugs in the volcano zone, etc. Nothing here reinvents the wheel of what an action-focused RPG is. The key is in just how high quality it is for a platform that suffers routinely from a lack of budget and scope. While you can see the limits of having a mobile chipset powering everything, the devs can make you feel that sense of grandeur that these 100-foot tall gods should offer in a 3D space. All of this is in service of some excellent sword, board, and bow-focused gameplay. Asgard's Wrath 2 goes for that physics-based approach to combat, which serves it greatly. The recent Assassin's Creed Nexus went for a more robotic approach to its melee, and it felt extremely early VR-ish. Asgard's Wrath 2 instead has you realistically slicing, dicing, and parrying enemies at close range. Every weapon can be thrown and then called back a la Mjolnir with a flick of the wrist. Ranged weapons have light aim assist by default, so you'll still need to get really damn close to your target, and it feels satisfying to ping someone in the head for extra damage. Successful blocks and parries can open up enemies for critical strikes. Little red jewel-looking target will appear at specific spots per enemy, and if you hit or shoot them, you'll deal a massive amount of damage. When an enemy is defeated, you'll slice through them like a warm knife through butter, and the inner maniac in you can come out when you're lopping off their heads and limbs in quick succession before their body turns to dust. You have 4 weapon slots, both hips and both shoulders. You can set your swords, shields, bows, etc. wherever you'd like, and I tended to have ranged and shields on my back and swords and grenades on my hip. I did run into an issue with tracking a few times on the controllers as the inside-out system was blocked by my body when I went to grab a weapon. It didn't happen often, but when it did, boy was it annoying. Holding your arms out at any time and clicking the right stick will reset your positioning, and you want to do that occasionally if you've been moving around a lot. While you have an epic campaign to get through, I ended up spending a fair amount of time in the Chaotic Rift Endless Dungeon system. As you progress through the campaign, it'll also open up more levels to be used in the procedural generation for that system, and it's really fun and adds a ton of longevity to the game. I mean, it's already big just campaign-wise, but the options for the Chaotic Rifts and extra meta leveling system for your Guardian are a very welcome addition. You'll fight your way through multiple rooms until you reach a boss fight, making choices on gear setups and buffs along the way. It's a typical roguelike, but a solid one, with promises of more to come over the upcoming months, content-wise. There's also a lot of asynchronous multiplayer hooks in the form of both Dark Souls-styles avatars that dot throughout the open world and inside dungeons, and the more interesting use of the helpful or harmful avatars that players can leave inside Chaotic Rifts. If you're not a dink, you can leave a helpful specter to fight alongside others during their runs. That barely happened though, because conversely, if you want your inner Loki to run free, you can set an enemy for others to contend with. And for being only 30 gigabytes and on a mobile chipset, Asgard's Wrath 2 is a bit of a miracle in the graphic departments. I played on the MetaQuest 3 provided for me for the Assassin's Creed Nexus review, and the game's development actually started on the Quest 2, and I've heard good things about performance there. It is a damned good-looking game overall. You will see the limitations of the system in some of the textures and environments, with low resolutions standing out. Enemies, NPCs, and main characters look fantastic, even if I'm not the biggest fan of the ancient, high-tech look. One of the game's top areas, though, is its audio. And while the voice acting's pretty good, helped by solid writing the majority of the time, the soundtrack is great. It feels almost Gareth Coker-esque, which is, I think, the highest compliment I can give to anything. The sound effects also do a great job of conveying what's going on clearly, though some of the companion and quest reminder dialogue grew thin over time. There's a whole request board for fetch quests in the main hub, and the NPCs you're gathering items for never shut up. They'll constantly poke their way in, sometimes mid-conversation, reminding you about the thing they want for the 1000th time. But overall, Asgard's Wrath 2 is a fantastic audio and visual package. I never once felt queasy when playing, despite using the full locomotion setup with minimal accessibility features enabled. There is a lot of platforming, running, jumping, and falling, and I never once felt sick, though there were a few times where your character kind of gets stuck in place, and I started moving in real life and almost felt like I was going to fall over. There are few things as disorienting as being locked in place inside a VR headset and then moving in real life. Wrapping things up, Asgard's Wrath 2 is an epic action RPG worthy of being Meta's must-have game. It looks and runs great, plays fantastically, and has more high-quality content than most RPGs I've played before.